Romans 8:28 says this, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Let me read that again. Romans 8:28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." So I'm giving the chapter today on Joseph. And normally, Tim gives me some really hard stuff, and I think it's the stuff he doesn't want to preach on. Excuse me. But today, he's like, "You're going to preach on Joseph," and I started reading in Genesis, and it's 13 chapters long. So I was going to read the scripture this morning of all 13 chapters, but I figured that you would probably leave, and so I'm going to try and narrow it down. But actually, I've just picked two scriptures, and we read one, and there'll be another one later on. But this whole message today comes from Genesis 37 through the end of Genesis, the 50th chapter. I want you to think in terms of the characters that we mention here in this story, to try and put yourself in the position of who we're talking about here in the Bible. Because even though this story was, thousands of years before Christ was born, it has such a huge meaning to us today. So first of all, let me get a little help here. You guys have to help me. Anybody have brothers and sisters in here? Just raise your hand if you have brothers or sisters. So you're going to relate to this story really, really well. How many have brothers or sisters who went sometime in your life to your mother or father and tattled on you? Everybody, right? So I never did that to any of my brothers or sisters, so had a hard time relating to that. See, it was tough being perfect growing up, but no, I think all of us can relate to that, and we can put ourselves in the position of being the tattler, and we can put ourselves in the position of being the one who was tattled on. Now, when you went to tell your parents about your sibling, what you told them was always true, correct? 100%. Got that. Nobody disagreed with me there. So when you went and told your parents, it was 100% right. And when your siblings went and told on you, it was always 100% correct also, right? No. Why did I get all these no? Well, that's kind of how this whole story begins here in Joseph. Joseph's out on the field with his brothers, 10 of them, and it's a nice family, a huge family. And in the Old Testament, we got to understand that at this time, that did not mean that all 10 children were from the same mother. So there were several of our patriarchs that had multiple wives, but these are all from the same father. The children, their genealogy all goes back to Jacob. And so they're out on the field, and Joseph comes back and tells his dad, they're not doing a good job out there. They're not doing a good job at all. And I don't like what they're doing, and you wouldn't like what they're doing, and he gives a bad report. Well, it also goes in the story to tell us that Joseph was the favorite. Now, did any of you ever feel that one of your siblings had been considered the favorite by mom or dad? Was that you? For any of you, was it you? Who's honest enough to say, you? Wasn't me. I wasn't the favorite, that's for sure. But I did have a little brother, and so actually I had a sister, so that ruled everything out because she got all the favoritism. But everybody, we know that there's some favoritism. Now, I know that with my grandma, though, I was the favorite. No doubt. I understood that part. I could do no wrong in the eyes of my grandma. I was the first grandson, and I played that. I was good. Oh, it was good. But But I think that's why she died so young. It's because I had to go pray about that, I think. But there's a favoritism that goes on in the family, and how we respond to that has a lot to say about who we are as individuals. And so, I got some slides up here, and I just want to we're going to go through some slides, and we're going to talk about some different things that happen in this journey. But along the way, we're going to look at some different characteristics that take place in each one of our lives, and how we deal with them, and how we become better. Now, Tim has been telling us that as we're going through this series, we need to think about a story that is above and a story that's running down here below. And the story up here is God's story. It's got His purpose. It's His purpose for our lives. It's so how we understand how He relates to us through all of the experiences that we're having in life, and what He is really trying to teach us from His perfect will. And then how that story interacts with how we handle all the things that happen down here on earth. And for each one of us, it's different. But I can say for each one of us, we all know that there are challenges, that there are difficulties, that there are circumstances, that there are joy, there's happiness, there's moments. And we experience those moments in a different way, sometimes just simply based on where we are at the moment, as we're relating to the experiences in life. So the first slide I want you to go to is just 17. So now everybody knows what 17 is all about, right? 17 is how old Joseph was when this really began. So now figure it out. You got a 17-year-old, he's the favorite, and he's the youngest. What could possibly be going wrong here with this story? Just the fact that you have a 17-year-old tells me that we have a problem. I mean, that's just, you know it. There's no other way around it. But Joseph, the 17-year-old, now gets this beautiful robe. And it's nicer than any of his brothers. Matter of fact, it's got jewels on it. And it's to demonstrate, his father wants to demonstrate to his family, this is my boy. This is my boy. Look, he's got the robe. He's the boy. And he sends his son back out to the brothers who are out in the field with the sheep, and they're shepherds, and they're doing what they do. They go from one grazing spot to another to try and fatten up the stock. So he's out there again to see how they're doing. This time, they see him coming. And when they're coming, they start talking about the fact that they're going to kill him. But why do they want to kill him? Well, it's because he had a dream. And he had a dream that he shared with his brothers. And this is something that every kid would do, right? I'm going to tell you about my dreams. I can't even remember half of mine, but he says to his brothers, I had this dream, and basically what he said to them, I'll just translate, I won't tell you about the dream, is that someday, all of you kids and mom and dad are going to bow before me. Oh, that had to make them all really happy. What? Are you nuts? No, honestly, I had a dream. This is what it did. I'm telling you, this is going to happen. So now he's going out to meet the family out there on the fields. And they see him coming. And like, here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him. Not because he's on a cruise in the Caribbean, but because he actually said, I'm going to bow. I want you guys to bow down before me. Sometime it's going to happen. They want to kill him. They're going to make sure it don't happen. Absolutely no way will that happen. But one brother, and it was easy for me, and I tried to remember the names of the brothers, and this guy's name's Reuben. How do you remember Reuben? So this is the sandwich guy. So Reuben says, you know what? Let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a hole. And so they throw him in a well that's dried up, and he's like, you know what? It's okay. We can rough him up a little bit, throw him in a hole, do whatever. But I don't want you to kill him. And so they agree they're going to throw him in a hole. So he shows up, they rip off his pretty robe, and they throw him in the well. And somewhere in the story now, Reuben must be off at the sandwich shop or something, because he's not there. But the other brothers see these traders coming along, and they decide they're going to sell him to the traders, taking care of a problem. And so they pull him out of the hole, and they sell him for 20 pieces of silver. $20. Seems like they got a deal. So the traders take him off, and he goes off to Egypt, and that's kind of like where we're at right now, when we realize that all of a sudden Joseph's life of being the favorite, the prize, changed from being a dream to a hardship. It goes to this terrible hardship. His life all of a sudden is, I went from being, and you guys are going to bow down to me someday, to being in a hole. How many of you have ever been in a hole? Yeah, we all find ourselves in a place of despair sometimes, and we're just not sure how we're going to get out. And we'll blame it on every other person we could possibly think of as to why we're in the hole. It's there. And we fell in it. But somebody had to push us in it, or somebody had to throw us in it, or somebody had to do something to us to get us there. It could have had nothing to do with us. And the crazy thing about that is, Joseph just continues to love God. It makes no sense to me either. Absolutely none. He goes through a lot of hardship, but not only is he sold to this caravan that's walking through, but he ends up in Egypt, and he's sold to Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is he's the chief of the guard. He's a very important administrator. He's very powerful. And what happens is that as Joseph is being a slave in this house, Potiphar starts realizing he must be blessed, because everything he does is awesome. Everything he does turns my life better. And so Potiphar says, you know what? I'm going to put this guy in charge of my whole household. And he's in charge now of the whole house. Now, that just makes no sense to me. We don't have slaves, and thank goodness we don't. But even if we had a slave, we certainly wouldn't put a slave in charge of our house, would we? I don't think so. I don't know how it worked. But the story says that here's this person that is now in charge of the house. And it goes through, and it tells us that, and everything he does is just really helping. And so all Potiphar did in the scripture, it says and I'm going to paraphrase because I do that every once in a while, he laid back in his recliner. It was made of rock, okay? And he ate. Probably watched the Super Bowl, I don't know. But that was his responsibility. Joseph was in charge of everything else. But you know what? It also says in the scripture that Joseph was a well-built and handsome man. And when I read that, I knew that they were talking about me. And that's hard to imagine, but not one person laughed, Colette. It's worse. John, they were talking about you. I just want you to know. So Joseph is this athlete. He is it. He's not just a slave in a house, but now he's the leader, but he's also handsome and he's got it going on. And Potiphar's wife likes what she sees. And so she tries to seduce him. Come lay with me. What's the first thing you're supposed to do when that temptation comes? Run! Absolutely. When that temptation, run! And so Joseph does exactly that, and he runs, but he leaves his jacket behind. This guy has a problem of leaving things behind. You know, he leaves his cloak behind, and he gets out of the house. And Potiphar's wife now says to her husband, Joseph tried to rape me. And I got his coat to prove it. And she tells that to her servants and to her staff and to everybody. And Potiphar is incensed. He's just absolutely incensed, and he throws him in jail. And so hardship continues. He goes from woohoo to woo. That's the way life is going all the time for Joseph. And so now he's in jail, and you can just imagine this jail for slaves. It can't be something that's nice. But he's blessed again by God when he's there. And while he's there, it's really cool. The jailer, the warden, sees that he is this incredible guy, and he puts him in charge of the entire jail. I'm still like, this is nuts. It makes no sense whatsoever why these things should be happening, except there's these little lines in there, and God favored him. Because he continued to focus on the story. The main thing, what his purpose is in his relationship with his Creator, his Father. So now he's in charge of this jail. But hardship still goes on, because these two guys come up to him and say, hey, we had this dream, it ain't good. You know, can you tell us what the dream's all about? Sure, I'll tell you what the dream's about. And he says to one of them, you know, you're going to be working with Pharaoh one day, and you're going to get executed. Honesty was certainly one of his strengths. I don't know if I could say to somebody, well, I'm interpreting your dream and you're dying tomorrow, have a good day. But that's what happened. And so the guy that's working in Pharaoh now is with him, but Joseph's still in jail, and he's in jail a couple of years. This is not something that was like, hey, 3 days, I post bond and I get out. No, he's in jail, and it's hardship, but he's in charge of the jail. So the story goes on with this interesting life that he's leading. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh has a dream, actually has a double dream, and he calls all of his people, all of his wise ones to be in front of him, and he tells them the dream, and he asks them, what does it mean? I don't know. That's the response he got from all his wise people. I don't know, Pharaoh, you got a problem. I don't know what that means. So he says, is there anyone who can interpret my dream? And the guy that he said, you're going to go and work with Pharaoh, says, well, you know, there was this guy in jail. His name was Joseph, and he interpreted my dream. And so Pharaoh calls Joseph to his presence and says, I hear you interpret dreams. And Joseph says, I don't interpret dreams, but God will tell you what your dream is. And so as he's doing that, Pharaoh says, what does this mean? He says, well, I'm telling you, Pharaoh, your dream means that right now for the next 7 years, we are going to be in a time in Egypt where there is just a multitude of good. Our crops are going to be awesome. Our cattle are going to be amazing. Everything is going to be awesome. But following that, there's going to be 7 years of famine and drought and hardship and suffering, and it's going to be absolutely horrid. Well, Joseph, what should we do about that? Well, I could kind of hear, well, Pharaoh, if I was in charge, I would build huge barns and I would store up everything so that we have all that we need for those 7 years when we go through hardship, and we'll be able to survive. And so Pharaoh says, I love that idea. You're in charge. It just happens to him. It's like, I kind of feel like this is the guy that every time he didn't show up for a committee meeting, he ended up finding out that he was in charge of the committee. Salvation Army officers know what that means. But now he's in charge, and not only is he in charge, but Pharaoh takes off his ring, sticks it on Joseph's finger, and says, you're second in command, you're in charge of everything in Egypt, and the only thing you're not in charge of is me. You're in charge of everything else. And so Joseph sets off to do exactly what it is that he has to do. And I can see this is a lot of work. You're building barns, you're doing this, you're doing that. But, Joseph also gets like really cool things. He gets like his own chariot, He gets his own servants, his own staff. He's got it going on now. He's living the high life. He's 30 years old now. 30. Think about that. He went from 17 to 30. 13 years of hardship. And now he's second in command. Not so sure that necessarily was an easy life, being second in command. It is a hard job being in charge. There's no doubt about it. But it's a totally different issue than it is being in jail. So he goes from being in jail to being in charge. Now, under this, we see the fact that Joseph is this incredible leader, and he begins to demonstrate his leadership to everyone in Egypt. And all of a sudden, they just see that everything that Joseph touches prospers, and he continues to give credit to God. And it's true. For the next 7 years, they fill up all those barns. And then come to find out that they didn't have enough barns, so they built more and they filled those up. And they didn't have enough, and they built more and they filled those up. And they didn't have enough, and they built more and they filled those up. It was like the most bumper harvest in the history of the world. And now comes the hardship. But it was during this time of awesomeness that Joseph also got married and had a couple kids. Kind of cool. He's got his own family now, enjoying life. Now the hardship comes. They're into this drought period for about a couple years, and people start coming to Egypt and begging for food. They have nothing to eat. They're starving. They're not sure how they're going to survive. The future of entire families and generations is now in jeopardy. And they come to Egypt and they give everything to buy food. They're bringing all the wealth that they had accumulated throughout their lives, and they're trading that all in for food that they can take back and feed their family. And Joseph's able to feed all the people in Egypt and still have plenty to help those around them. Well, Joseph's family gets into this situation where they're the ones that are starving. And Joseph's dad, Jacob, also might be called Israel as you're reading the scripture. He decides to send his brothers, Joseph's brothers, to Egypt to get food, and they get a whole lot of stuff together, and they go, and they do this. And they're stuck. They're stuck. They don't want to go, but they know they have to go. And so they go there, and they ask for food. And Joseph recognizes them. I love this part. I have a friend, Colonel knows her, Colette knows her, Lindsay. And Lindsay and I, we were at McDonald's once. And there were some Hispanic guys here, and they were talking really loud. And Lindsay and I were back here, and we were going to order our Happy Meal or whatever, you know. And these guys were talking about how awesome she looked. Ooh, that girl's hot. And they were going on back and forth, and they were just getting louder and louder and louder. And they were speaking in Spanish. So they didn't think that Lindsay had any idea until Lindsay started speaking in Spanish back to them and tell them how rude they were and how offensive that was, and they should keep their mouth shut and all this other stuff. And it was like the guys went and just kind of walked up, I'll take the number 2, and then they left. But, you know, she grew up in South America, so it kind of seemed logic. But that's how it was when Joseph and his brothers showed up. See, Joseph had mastered the Egyptian language, and he actually looked Egyptian the way he was made up. And his brothers came, and they're talking Hebrew, and they're talking loud, and they don't think that this Egyptian guy, because they didn't recognize him, understood what they were saying. And so he makes the decision to give them all food, but he calls them spies. You're spies here in my land. You've come to destroy us. Well, no, we're not. We're here with Jacob. We're here in Jacob, and he has there's another one of our brothers back there, and we got to go back there and take care of them. And they're you can just figure out how fast they're talking, trying to make that all work. Joseph says, I'll tell you what, I believe your story, but one of you are staying behind, and the rest of you go back. And when you bring that brother back here, I'll let this guy go, because I want to see if you're telling the truth, that you actually have another brother. He hadn't seen his brother. It's actually a brother from the same mother, so it's his real brother. Total 100% blood. And they do that. And when they get back to Jacob, Jacob's infuriated. I am not sending my youngest out again. Do you know what happened the last time I did that? He got killed by a wild animal. We're not doing that again. But they do. And they send him out. And so when they get there, Joseph sees them coming, and he weeps. He weeps. It's about 39 at the time. It's a long time. A long time. So they ask for more food, and they brought more riches. And he puts all those, gives them food. But you know what he did the first time, and he does again the second time? He took all the money that they gave him and he put them back in the bags. And so the first time he said that they were spies because he accused them of stealing. And the second time he puts them in there and he accuses them of taking his favorite cup. Well, no, we didn't steal from you. Yes, you did. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. So they check them all. Every one. They get to the last one, and sure enough, there's the cup. He's a wise guy. Well, I'm keeping this guy here. And they freak out. They come, and one of them comes and you got to let him go. Take me instead. Kill me. Do whatever you need to do, but let him go. If you take him, this will kill my father. It's at this point that Joseph breaks down, and he's crying. He asks everybody else to leave except for the brothers. And he tells them, I'm Joseph. Can you imagine that moment? I can't. I had a dream that one day you would bow down before me. Being faithful is an interesting thing, but Joseph at that very moment understood his purpose. He knew what his purpose in life was. He understood his calling. He figured it all out. It was like he understood what these last 22 years of his life were all about. 22 years to get to a point where he can confirm what it was that God was asking him to do. Why he had to go through all this stuff. 22 years. And now he has confirmation. It's like God had this moment that came upon him. How long has it been for you? How long have you been struggling, trying to figure it out? I'm not really sure what my purpose is. I don't know why I'm doing it. I know that I come to church every Sunday morning and that preacher guy tells me I need to be faithful. I need to be in a right relationship with God. And if I do, God's going to bless me. But we can't see it because we're going through it. We don't understand why people have to die. We don't understand why people have to get sick. We don't understand why we have to go through such hardship and agony and pain and suffering, because we have a relationship with God. It's all supposed to be perfect. It's all supposed to be good. Church, will you pray for my family so that they don't have to go through this? Church, will you pray? And sometimes the answer that God gives us is no. It's okay. But they got to go through it. Then there comes a time in our walk where we start to understand why. For some of us, when we lose that relationship with God, we never figure that out. And as we walk on our journey, we're miserable, and we're angry, and we're irritated at everything that happens to us in life. Woe is me. But here's the story of Joseph. And he knew that the most important thing for him to do was to be faithful. He had to be faithful to God. And he looked at his brothers. He said, go get your dad. And I'm going to send everybody to go get him. It's like he sent out everybody. The best chariots, the best trucks, the Humvees went out there. They got it all. They loaded up all the stuff, and he said, bring them back. I'm going to give you the best land. I'm going to send you to Goshen. Now, that's the part that I didn't understand. You mean to tell me Goshen is the best place that there is? But he sends them to Goshen, which was a land of fruitfulness. It was like the best land in Egypt. And they go and get him. They said, Dad, they got Benjamin. But it's Joseph. He's alive. And he wants you to come see him. How would you feel if your son, that you hadn't seen for over 20 years, that you assumed was dead, that you had been grieving your whole entire life, was now told to you he's alive? They went to see Joseph. And while they were still a few miles off, Joseph came to meet them. And it's interesting what happens. Jacob bows before his son. Jacob lives to be about 147 years old. Johnny, you got a long way to go. All right. 147. And Joseph's there when he dies. And Joseph's brothers start to freak out. What's going to happen to us now? Joseph's in charge. Dad's gone. Now we're going to get it. So they sent one of the brothers to Joseph, and they said, Joseph, Dad's last thing he said for us to tell you is that he wants you to forgive us. I love that plan. And Joseph cries. And it's then when Joseph realizes, I forgive you. It doesn't matter all that happened. I've been faithful to what God had in store for me, and I forgive you. And not only do I forgive you, but I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to take care of your children, and I'm going to take care of your grandchildren. What an incredible life lesson. Joseph lived to be 110. 77 years of that were blessings. Hardship, blessings. You know what he said when his brothers came to him about forgiveness? Genesis 50, the 20th verse is that second verse I want to read to you. Genesis 50, the 20th verse. I think I got the wrong verse. There it is. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. My friends, each one of us, every single person in this room is special to God. And He has chosen you to do His good and perfect will. And I know that each person in this room has gone through challenges and difficulties and circumstances that they do not understand. But the reality is that because we know our God is just and faithful, and He does what He says He's going to do, He will bless you if you're in the right relationship with Him. The rest of us, the rest of the journey, just teaches us how to be faithful. Ask our praise team to come. We're going to close. And as they come, I don't know where you are in your journey. Some are certainly going through some difficult times right now as they're grieving. Others are sick. Others need us to pray for family members. And we certainly want to do that. But maybe the most important thing that we're going to do today is pray for ourselves and where we are on this journey.